There for Care is brought to you by CareScout with the goal of sharing real-life conversations about aging care. Views expressed on this program are the speaker's own. We do not provide medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice. Always talk to your own professional advisors for advice tailored to your needs.
I had the plan. And then caregiving comes in and it's like, nope, plan gone. A lot of late night insomnia sessions, crying, thinking that like no one understood, feeling so alone, so isolated, but also I could no longer depend on hoping and praying nothing would happen. I spent so much time trying to solve a problem versus honoring and being present with my mom.
What would you say to someone that's just stepping into the caregiving adventure now?
Slow down and make sure you don't treat your person like their disease. You treat them like a human who is now in a new stage of their life. When you're saying yes to caring for someone else, you were saying yes to thinking about the needs of someone else. And I didn't really have a plan, but I knew that I didn't want to keep paying for care for someone else to be there for my mom. I need to be the person there with my mom. I only get one mom. I only get one chance to do this, and I don't want to miss these moments if these are my last few months with my mom.
Hi, this is the There for Care podcast by CareScout, a podcast about all things aging care, whether it's for you or for someone you love. I'm Amy Rein, and today we have Jessica Guthrie. Jessica was 26 when her mom started to experience early-onset Alzheimer's, and what became a long-distance caregiving balancing act turned into a full-time in-home reality, and with it came a shift in identity and purpose and possibilities. So this is a story that so many millennials and so many of just us are living in general these days. So we wanted to hear from Jessica and what she's learned and what we can all take with us for our own caregiving adventures. Welcome, Jessica. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. Can you take us back to that first chapter? What was it like in this long distance balancing act with this new reality and trying to navigate this while working and caring for your mother?
Oh my gosh, take you back. So it's been 10 years and 11 months. So we have to go back to 2014. My mom was 66 years old. She was an educator in our local school system. I am an only child. She's a single mom. So we've always just been two peas in a pod. I was living in Dallas, Texas at the time, working in education. And we noticed, and I say we, my mom and her siblings, we noticed that things were starting to be a little bit different. She was forgetting her routine. She would have the same schedule every day driving to school, but she was missing on things she'd been doing the last 20 years. She was repeating herself. She was asking the same questions. And then fast forward, she got into a car accident. And I knew as soon as that car accident happened that it was her fault. Like she caused it, which then led me to go down the path of the first doctor's appointment and the neurologist appointment and getting a full diagnosis. And so September 2014, my mom was formally diagnosed with what they believed to be early onset Alzheimer's disease. And she was 66. I was 26. And at the time I was like, okay, I know nothing about Alzheimer's disease. I know nothing about caring for my mom. I also don't live here. I live in Texas. She's in Virginia. How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to make it work? And so my peers weren't talking about care. I didn't really know what to do besides Google and or what I knew from the movies. And so this first stage, I like to say, like, I hit the ground running because I didn't have a guidebook. I didn't know what to ask or what to expect. So I was like, my mom deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. My mom deserves to feel as independent as possible. And so I just created systems and routines, and I prepped 40 and 50 meals to put them into the freezer, to hold her over in between my visits. I would come home every 2 to 3 weeks to check in, to clean up, to find things she had hidden in the closet, to take her to doctor's appointments, to buy new clothes, to keep the facade that everything was okay. And then, of course, that facade only lasts for so long. And so that was the first 5 years of this journey of truly just going back and forth to protect my mom's image, to make sure that she had what she needed to be independent, but also to thrive. But then when I realized that things had gotten to be more difficult for her, I had to figure out, how was I going to still be young professional Jessica, all the while show up for my mom, because she showed up so much for me. I had to make sure that I was there for her. So yeah, the first chapter of being a young professional living in Texas, my mom being in Virginia, consisted of a lot of plane tickets, a lot of late night insomnia sessions, crying, thinking that like no one understood, feeling so alone, so isolated, but also like not really feeling the grief of what I was going through because I was just so focused on doing all the things, creating all the systems, making sure she had what she needed, and then showing up at work and trying to be as competent and confident as possible so that people wouldn't think that I wasn't holding up my end of the deal when it came to like being a good performer or a peer in our workplace. And so when I look back, the beginning was chaotic. And I'm just like, I don't know how I did it. I really don't know how I did it. You just keep going. You put your head down, you keep going.
Yeah.
So that was my first dip into long distance caregiving. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned, no one else in your group was going through this. So where did you even know where to look to start to build those systems? And then, it seems like you're taking a very sort of pragmatic,
yes.
this is a problem to be solved type of approach. So how'd you even know where to look?
I was an educator. I taught high school social studies, and I knew that even with young adults, having systems and routines are critical to creating a sense of predictability and safety. And I was like, I don't really understand aging people, but I do believe that systems and routines are probably helpful. And so that's what I leaned into. And it worked, right? Like I had checklists for her getting her activities done. We had, full systems for her telling me when she took her medications. I labeled everything in the house, right? I leaned into just my strengths and what I knew at the time and realized that was actually so helpful for her. And so it worked until it didn't work. But yeah, that's honestly between that and then my first insight into Alzheimer's disease was watching Grey's Anatomy on TV. And even then you're like, that's the most dramatic version of Alzheimer's disease, Meredith's mom. But I was like, okay, my mom might have agitation. My mom might have behavioral issues. My mom is going to have short-term memory. Okay. I'm going to be prepared for that. But like, that is truly all that I had. And then like drive the questions that I asked or like the searches that I, did on Google at 2 a.m. because that's the only time you have free to figure out how to help yourself.
Yeah. You said it worked until it didn't work.
Yeah.
So what was that moment?
I think that's the thing. So my mom has been living with Alzheimer's disease, and I say living because she truly has been living, right? My mom worked for the first couple of years of her diagnosis. My mom lived independently for the first 5 years. And what was working at the time was like I could use doorbell cameras and cameras around the house to call my mom to do things. I could leave notes for her to follow and she would check along the way. I could trust that she would stay in the house and or not open the door for strangers, right? Like she could still get herself dressed. She could still heat up food in the microwave. And then one day, which I really wasn't expecting, you realize like, oh, she can't follow the directions to heat her food up. That's why she's losing weight because she's not eating. You realize, oh, my mom is now going out the front door and walking across the street to the neighbor's house and sitting in their garage for hours waiting for someone to talk to her. My mom is now walking down the street because she's confused because the power went out, right? Like you realize my mom started to lose what we consider like executive functioning, like her judgment. And I didn't realize that was part of Alzheimer's until it started to happen. And so my labeling didn't matter anymore, which then took my stress level up, and I realized that I could no longer manage her care from afar because it was truly just me. And every time I left, I'm just like, okay, we pray nothing happens. But I could no longer depend on hoping and praying nothing would happen. And so when I say things no longer worked, I realized I needed to make a change and move back home because those things were no longer working.
Yeah. So with that shift between managing care and actually being the care provider.
Yeah.
What did you learn about sort of presence or, the importance of you being physically located with your mom during that time?
So this is what my mom was diagnosed in 2014. And then I made the choice to move home in 2019. And this is before the pandemic. This was also a time when people really weren't working from home. And so the first thing I'll say is I'll never forget, like my boss saying, we'll support you. Go back home. Let home be your home base. And so the first thing I'll name is that like I was so concerned about contributing and being part of a community and still working, even though I was virtual. And little did I know a year ago, everyone would be virtual. So I feel like I was blazing a trail there. But me working from home and having a supportive work environment allowed me to be present with my mom. And what I learned is that I got to see my mom in a whole new light because I had the privilege of being there with her, right? I got to see the things that made her smile, that made her laugh, that frustrated her. I got to see the things that made her anxious, and which I knew them a little bit. But when you're only coming home for 4 days at a time and you're on a tight schedule, you don't get a chance to like just see your person and all of their humanity. And you learn the power of just like slowing down. You learn the power of, what makes her laugh and brings her comfort. You also learn like what you need. Like I learned a lot about what does Jessica need to be able to thrive when she is giving so much of herself all the time, because I'm now at home with my mom. So I like to say that like presence, me being present with my mom and moving back home to care for her hands-on was the best gift I could have ever given myself. And at the time, I was 20, I was 30 years old. I thought my life was ending. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't move home to the basement. I can't be in my childhood. Like, you society conditions you that you should not be moving back home. You like your life is supposed to look X, Y, and Z way. And I felt that my future was no longer mine. And I can look back now and be like, oh my gosh, Jessica, you were so dramatic, because going home and being present and proximate was the best pivot I could have ever made for both my mom, because my mom is still here, and for me, and just shifting my own identity of like what matters most. Mm-hmm.
Along that line, that collision with your identity between being a daughter, a professional, a full-time caregiver, like how do you navigate those sort of lanes of your life, or are they different lanes? Have they all become one lane? And how do you think about that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So my social media handle is When Career and Caregiving Collide, because it very much felt like it was a collision, like the cars crashed. Okay? Mm-hmm. There's no better way to put it. The cars crashed. And it's because, again, I was someone who had plan A, plan B, plan C. This is the vision. We're doing X, Y, and Z by this time. I'm going to get my, master's degree by this time. I'll be Dr. Guthrie by this time. Like I had the plan. And then caregiving comes in and it's like, nope, plan gone. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think I started my handle in that form of When Career and Caregiving Collides, because you have choice points. Like you now have to figure out how you're going to pivot, how you're going to show up when that collision happens, because you're going to collide. And so I've now realized that it's less about having, distinct lanes, and now more about just like, how do I show up and put the energy in the place that needs me most, right? Like, and manage my energy in a way that allows me to show up in all the places. And so obviously my mom's disease has progressed, so she needs different things from me. However, I am a caregiver, and I prioritize my mom to make sure that she gets what she needs. But I've now shifted my life, and we're like, my career is now rooted in supporting other family caregivers and are working with companies to make sure that we're elevating the family caregiver. And so like instead of forcing the lanes or the cars to work together, I've made the thing that was a struggle part of my purpose, right? Which allows me to actually manage it in a different way. But I think the thing that I also want to make sure I say is that you, like the individual, are such a critical piece of this story. And I'm really intentional about caring for myself so that I can show up in the midst of being a caregiver, right? And so I'm really disciplined about my own wellness practices. I'm disciplined about my own mental health to make sure that I can have the things to pour into my mom. Mm-hmm. And still show up as the professional, the leader that I want to be. So yeah, how do I do it? I think I've realized that there's no perfect balance. It's never going to be the thing that you want it to be. But like, I have some choices to make, and I'm going to choose my energy in the way that makes the most sense for me to be the best person possible.
Can you talk a little bit about your choice to leave the workforce and become a full-time caregiver for your mom? Because I know a lot of our listeners are doing both right now, right? They are holding down a job, and they are also caring for a loved one. Mm-hmm. Like, what is that balance? And what was that sort of tipping point for you where it was, I can't do both of these? Yeah.
The tipping point for me was when I realized that I went on sabbatical. So I put my mom on home hospice May 16th, 2022. And part of one of our benefits in our job was after you've been there for 10 years, you get a sabbatical. So it was like a 4-week paid. And I was like, okay, great. And so I tacked that on to FMLA. So we got 6 weeks of FMLA. So I had 10 weeks off. And it was during that 10 weeks where I realized, oh my gosh, I don't like my job anymore. I don't feel fulfilled on my job anymore. But most importantly, beyond that, right? It was, things keep going. Things kept going. Yes, I was chief program officer. Yes, I was in such role. But in the end of the day, the work kept going. They didn't need me, right? Like, it'd be nice for me to be there, but they didn't need me. And that's when I realized, like, holy smokes, I only get one mom. I only get one chance to do this. And while I'm not perfect, I don't want to miss these moments if these are my last few months with my mom. And so it was that time that I had off that made me realize it's time to leave my job. And so I told them a year in advance. I was a really good executive planner. I let them know a whole year, and this will be my last year. And I didn't really have a plan, but I knew that I didn't want to keep paying for care for someone else to be there for my mom when I need to be the person there with my mom. And so that was a tipping point. And then it also made, I realized that like, I was already trying to do everything and multitask, and no one was getting the best of me. And so I said, given that my mom has stabilized and like she is benefiting from me being more present, more proximate, not being so consumed with all things of other people and work, I'm going to take this time to be present and proximate with her, and everything else will fall into place. And honestly, I left my job May 2023, and things have been, the challenge of working for yourself is a whole new vibe. Mm-hmm. However, I will never regret the time that I've had with my mom. I will never regret, right, being able to like sing to her and watch her laugh and, be available when like medical emergencies happened and I didn't have to run to a Zoom meeting, right? There's just something about being able to put your full attention into your person. And I'm just so grateful.
You referenced that your employer had that sabbatical program, and you've been very vocal that, support just can't be sort of a check the box benefit for employers. So from now that you've been through this yourself and you're in full on advocate now for your job, what does that meaningful support look like from an employer?
Yeah. So I've been both an employee and I've been the manager. And so I can tell you both sides. And, as someone who was a caregiver, who didn't actually call myself a caregiver immediately, but also didn't tell people right away that I was caring for my mom. It's like I was doing so much quietly. Like I would say, this is a side note, but I was flying. I was getting up on that 6:30 a.m. Southwest flight from Reagan National Airport, and then going to Dallas, Texas Love Field for a 10 a.m. meeting. I was burning the candle at both ends because I thought that's what I had to do as like a good young employee who was eager and wanted to be promoted. And what I learned quickly, one, that's not sustainable. Okay. And two, that I had this assumption that my employer, that my managers were not going to be supportive. And the moment that I told them all that I was doing, they were like, oh my goodness, Jessica, how can we help? Jessica, like you have already contributed so much. Like, how can we support you? And that was not what I was expecting. Right. And so I took that very mindset when I became a manager of people of like you don't have to hide being a caregiver. How can we make sure you can thrive as an employee here? Right. Like what might you need in your schedule? What do we need to flex? What do meetings need to look like for you? Right. Like, do you need, work from home time? Do you know your benefits? So I say all that to say, bring it back. I say all this to say, one, employers, the first thing I'll say is that you can have all of the resources, but if you have people who are not equipped to be empathetic managers, you're going to fail, right? Managers who like operate with curiosity, managers who hold space in your check-ins to check in as humans, managers who say like, what might you need for you to thrive? Like that was pivotal. I think the second thing employers can do is like, how are you creating space for people to connect, right? There's so many employee resource groups, but people have to feel seen and affirmed and part of a community so they can actually like, connect and not feel so isolated in the workplace. And I think finally, it's like, how do we create the culture of care being part of our conversations, right? A part of me sharing so publicly on social media is because I felt so isolated in the workplace because everybody was talking about being parents. And I was like, I'm not a parent, but I'm caring for somebody. Right. And I wanted to help shift the language of it's not just parents who have pickup at 4 p.m. My caregiver leaves at 4 p.m. My life changes, right? We have to stop saying like, mothers and fathers, like just caregivers. That includes everyone. And that like being inclusive matters, people feeling seen in the workplace. Anywho, those are my top 3 things. There's probably more, but I feel like if you believe that you don't have caregivers in your workplace, that's false. And even if they don't necessarily give themselves the title of caregiver, you have people in your company that are like thinking through the care of someone else. And so how do we create environments where, however I identify, I still feel like this is a safe place for me to be the best employee possible?
Yeah.
And don't take stuff off my plate. Let me thrive. Promote me. Give me opportunities. I'm not saying that I'm less than or I don't deserve anything. I actually want all of those things. I just might need some accommodations to be able to show up best. And that's okay.
Yeah. I love how all of your recommendations are very cultural, right? Like it's not like, oh, you just need this program or you need this benefit or something, but it is about those day-to-day conversations, how you can accommodate different needs and things like that. It's fantastic.
Yes, because I'll say, you might cut this out. It's okay. But I had no idea that I had paid FMLA.
Yeah.
Who knew, right? like, so your company you can have all this stuff, Genworth, CareScout, you can have all this stuff. But if you don't have people who are connecting you and saying like, have you thought about X, Y, or Z? Those resources go untapped and people feel like you're not helping them. But it's like, it's something as simple as a human connecting you.
Yeah. Well, I know you are spending a lot of time in the advocacy space now and a lot of different forums. What is maybe a cool innovation in that more sort of programmatic caregiver support that you've seen in the workplace? Is anything, or are we just behind there and need to keep working?
Oh, cool innovation. I would say, so I have worked with a company that they partner with an organization that basically provides like care navigation services. And like there's a literal human guide to help you, not just an app, but it's a person to help you navigate the realities of what you might be experiencing as a new caregiver. And this doesn't sound like that innovative, but for me, 10 years ago would have been great. And my job that was like, social justice oriented and very progressive, still didn't have this. But I was like, for a company to say, we care about our people enough to say that we've opted into this program where you have care navigation services. There's a human to connect with you to help you find local resources and then to help you as the caregiver, right? Like communicate with other family members, communicate with local resources so that you can still show up well in your job. And it's like, that seems so great. And I don't think that, I think it's as simple as like opting into this program, right? But I feel like that's probably been like the best thing that I've seen because it allows people to like pick and choose what they want, but also know that there's more there if you need it, without it being like in your face. And so it just feels like we're walking alongside you. We want for you to be great. And here's what you need.
Love that. So for our listeners, after 10 years in this journey, what would you say to someone that's just stepping into the caregiving adventure now?
Ooh, 10 years and 11 months. So we're almost at 11 years. Give me every day.
Yes.
Every day.
Rounding up 11 years. Yes.
What would I think regardless of the disease that you're navigating, I think when you're saying yes to caring for someone else, you were saying yes to now thinking about the needs of someone else. And the first thing I always say is like, while you are prioritizing, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a loved one, don't forget to prioritize you. You are just as important. And if you do not prioritize you, you will not be around to care for your person. And so as much as you want to hit the ground running, make the plans, make the routines, make sure you're a part of the plan and the routine too, is the first thing I'll say. And the second thing I speak into. So the second thing I'll say is truly just honor the moment that you're in. I didn't realize I'd be on this journey for almost 11 years. I had no idea it would be this long, but I spent so much time trying to solve a problem versus honoring and being present with my mom and making memories and seeing her for all that she was and is. And so I would just say, slow down. Your person isn't dying tomorrow. So slow down and make sure you don't treat your person like their disease. You treat them like a human who is now in a new stage of their life that you get to walk alongside them on. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, Jessica. We are so lucky just as a society to have such a passionate advocate as you in this space. I know we need a lot more voices and a lot more energy, and you're bringing a lot, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And that's been the There for Care podcast by CareScout. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.